So here is Darryl Thompson. Darryl is the Associate Director of the E.G. White Estate. This year's project, Darryl, is to actually fund translation, continued translation of the E.G. White writings. And that sounds pretty straightforward on the surface, but their roots actually run pretty deep. So I want us to take us back to square one so we can do a little bit of a historical perspective. Okay. So let's talk about 2009. What was happening as far as the number of books, the number of hits or languages? Help us with that.
So many of you may be familiar with Ellen White's writings and the old folio CD-ROM. But it was in 2009 that we released our first Ellen G. White Writings app for the iPhone. Now, many of you may remember that. It just had 16 books. And in those 16 English books, that's all it had in the beginning. And then in 2010, we worked on the Android app, and it also had 16 books. So that was our original beginning. And then you were wanting to know about the website. In 2010, at the General Conference session in Atlanta, we released egwritings.org. That was our new website in which you could search for 5 languages. And in those 5 languages, we just had 200 books. And we were getting about 2,000 visitors a week.
Okay, about 2,000 visitors a week, which would be about 8,000 a month. I want you to keep that in your mind. 2015, about 5 years from that point. The cloud is introduced. What advantages does that provide for?
So the biggest advantage that came along in 2015, many of you got to use and still continue to use the EGW Writings 1 app. But we released the EGW Writings 2 app that leveraged the ability to not have to have all the books on your phone. Because at that stage, we had about 20 gigabytes of data. Now, many phones at that stage used to have about 2 gigabytes. So how did you carry around on your phone all of the books? We also, at that stage, had 56 languages. So how do you carry around all the books? And then we had audiobooks. How do you put that on a phone? Well, you leveraged it by having the data in the cloud that everyone now is quite familiar with, and you could stream that data down to your device. So that was the power of the cloud that we introduced on our app in 2015.
And at 2015 now, we're talking about how many visitors at that point?
We had about 50,000 visitors that came to the app every month in 2015, yes.
So we were talking from 2009 and 8,000 a month to 5 or 6 years later, 50,000 a month. Right. Okay, so then a couple years later, in 2018-ish, what number of visitors and what's happening then?
So in 2018, we had really started to take off. Because when you have it in the cloud, we used to just have our servers there in the General Conference building, in the basement, in the server room, and we had a single cluster of servers there. But the problem happened is that people were hitting that server flat out all the time, and the bandwidth was full. And then the power of the cloud now, they could access it anywhere. Because you all use Google, right? For doing search. We wanted to have, at Ellen G. White's Writings, you to access her writings instantly, no matter where you were, anywhere in the world. Didn't matter if you're in Timbuktu in Africa or in Washington, D.C. If you did a search for Ellen White's writings, you could get an answer instantly. And that was our goal. And so we increased from 2015 to 2018 to around 500,000 visitors per month we're now hitting in 2018.
Okay, 8,000, 50,000, 500,000. Okay, so the next year, 2019.
Okay, so in 2019, things started to really happen. We actually leveraged a Cloudflare partner, which enabled us to put all of our content out on thousands of servers on the globe. So now we had the dream, just like in Google, you could instantly find the results. And the numbers jumped from 500,000 in 2019, in February 2019, to 2.1 million visitors per month.
2.1 million visitors in just that year from 500,000 or 500,000. All right, so now this is going to knock your socks off. Tell us about what that looks like today.
Okay, so I was reviewing last night some of our indexes for July. You remember last year we were telling you that we had, like 10 million visitors a month. we have, in the last 7 months, already nearly surpassed our visitor count for all of last year in the first 7 months. Last Sabbath, we had 1.5 million visitors.
Wait. Just last Sabbath?
Just last
On
Sabbath,
one
in
day?
one day, 1.5 million visitors
Okay.
hit and use EGW writings. And for the whole month, we had 22.15 million visitors just in the month that come and using EGW writings. And we have, in our lowest day, it's more than 500,000 repeat visitors are coming back daily, accessing writing. This is not just in English. This is now in 156 languages in 200 countries worldwide.